Well, welcome everyone to RIS Rx's GTN Edge Podcast. We're still trying to solve the mystery of where did $90 billion go, and we have our special detective for the day.
Tom Doyle, thank you for coming on. We are humbled and excited to have you. I think Gerard and I talk about this all the time. We've learned a lot from you, given just all the experience and background you have. So I'll give you kind of a chance to let everybody know what experience that is. But again, just thank you so much for joining us today.
I appreciate your kind words, and I'm almost humbled as well. I mean, I think, a long time in the industry, sometimes you meet some folks and you say, there's just something different here. And I go back to, thinking, it's been 14 years or so, and I'm like, here's two bright guys that want to really, solve problems. And here we sit with one of the biggest problems in our industry today. I started in the clinic at Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit. I saw patients. I had the usual run at 3M Pharma, led commercial organizations outside the U.S. This is really where I first met, Gerard and Stephen, worked with H.D. Smith and built out their specialty business and really felt there was a way to approach the market differently than maybe what was being done with the others. We transacted to a big company called AmerisourceBergen, and back at that point in time, I said, I'll never go work in big, bad corporate again. So I took my patient service business, sold to private equity, which became Eversana. I've never seen a time where the change is real. The technology, the promises of technology are starting to catch up. The pressures on brand teams are probably as high as we've ever seen, and 90 billion that's floating around somewhere is a big number.
Yeah, knowing that tribal knowledge is it's evidence with what we heard on that stage, and as you think about why we're here, where is the 90 billion? It's crazy because I know you just came back from the Drug Channels conference, and what'd you hear over there?
I think really it's a real tribute to what Drug Channels has done, which is there's a gap in the industry with all of the change going on of putting together senior leaders and really having an open, honest debate over real issues. 340B, what's going on between the health systems and pharma companies, the PBMs, how is that money flowing? Is there a need for more transparency? Where does the money sit? So the conference was really strong. And then they throw in Mark Cuban on the end. And so how can you top that with some very honest, feedback? But the one thing that hit me, I had a personal experience where I had to navigate PAP programs for my father-in-law. I run at the time some of the biggest PAP programs in the industry. And you don't realize it until you're in it. But we've got to rally together and see what we can do to try and make this simpler.
So I hear you, Tom. As you think about the privileged position we're in, we're managing, we're advising for these programs. And, when you think about, the intentions are good. So when good intentions turn into what we know, the reality on the pharmacy front line is, patient chaos sometimes. You have, let's call her patient Maria. When she saw that $700 copay, it's covered, PA's approved, what gives? And that's shock, right? And ultimately, unfortunately, that usually ends up in a poor patient experience and, prescription abandonment.
Yeah, I mean, you wonder how many times patients see a huge out-of-pocket, have no awareness, or have frustration in enrolling in a copay program and just walk away, right? I still remember I had a patient back when I was managing a pharmacy, type 1 diabetic, insulin resistant. We were working on the prioritization, and I remember the patient actually telling me, call her Maria. She's like, this medication is life-changing for me. Everything else I've tried just doesn't work. I'm just so excited to potentially get this thing approved. And so we did all this work. We got the appeal working. You work with the doctor, and then I remember the patient calling me, and she's like, I got a call from my insurance company and said, PA approved. But man, I can't afford it. They told me it's $700. So obviously, as a practitioner, we were very big on making sure these patients knew what was available. So I remember sitting on the phone, walking through with the patient. It wasn't an easy process. Fortunately, we were able to get that $700 copay down to $0. I remember the patient saying, you don't understand how happy I am. I could do backflips right now. If I could do backflips, I would. But that was just one of those those moments that just really resonate with you of how hard it is for these patients to really maintain access.
One of the things I always stress to the people in my contact centers, we're not taking calls to fill orders for shoes. We're trying to help somebody's grandma navigate the complexities. I think one of the most powerful days I had is we were doing a launch for a company that put together a really good high-touch program. And I saw one of our agents walking out at the end of the day, and I could just tell he was distressed. And he said, he goes, Tom, I spent an hour and a half with this patient trying to figure out, well, she didn't qualify for copay. Oh, she made too much money for a PAP program. She literally sat in that gap. And I remember he said, I felt like I failed. And I said, no, you didn't fail. I said, the system has failed the patient. And that's where I think there's still a huge opportunity for us to really address some gaps.
Perfect examples, guys, on, the intention, your intentions were for the good, your intentions or at least your staff's intention was for the good, but, the system fails the patient. These systems that were designed to help patients are just not speaking to each other. Like, how do we connect the dots? How do we how do we solve that problem?
So I know two things in life. I know biopharma and I know IndyCar racing. Why do I know IndyCar racing? I'm married into a family where my brother-in-law has been with AJ Foyt Racing now for 38 years. There was a great piece that I found that talked about a ICU in London that was doing the usual changes. Well, we're going to improve how we discharge patients and let's get together with this think tank and whatever. Instead of nothing changed. And so what did they do? They went to Ferrari. And they said, a F1 pit stop is highly orchestrated. How can I bring Ferrari in? And so they literally worked with Ferrari in the ICU. Then Ferrari took them to the shop. They improved by 66%. My only point is, and I said this at the conference, everybody loves F1. Well, the picture I've got up shows that an IndyCar pit stop is far more complex than an F1 pit stop. You have to put fuel in the car. The engineers are often making more real-time changes. And actually what happened in this stop, this is Santino Ferrucci, our driver, 25 laps to go. He's in third place. He's the fastest car on the track pretty much all day. But as you can see, there's a tire that got loose. And had that tire gone past the white line, we get penalized. We're back in 22nd. Our day is over. But everybody on that team was trained so well to do their job and also how to anticipate what were some of those challenges. The guy changing the front wheel, sees it, grabs it, saves the day. My point is, what I thought that picture illustrates well is kind of where we sit. We've got somebody that's doing the fueling. That's the person at the pharmacy. We've got the team owner over there that thinks he's, put this drug in market and it's all going to work perfectly. But we have to create that ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, in the health systems, our industry is not getting any less complex. So maybe F1's kind of more of like how things were, but Indy, since it's more complex, is how it is now. And I imagine things that you probably talked at the conference were like, how do we address this? How do we simplify the patient experience? And I know DTP is a big, topic right now.
Steve, I think it's a great point. And I think one of the challenges is for a manufacturer, we have what they think is happening and then what is really going to happen. And I think with DTP in particular, I really liked where the talk track went at drug channels, which is if you look at the media and if you look at the noise, DTC is going to, it's going to solve everything. It's the biggest buzz. And we know that for GLP-1s, there's a lot of complexities around that. What's the cost of the health system? Yes, they've lowered the prices. That's great. In certain categories, DTP is great. But there was even a robust discussion about every single, we're going to go direct to sponsor. We're going to go direct to the employer. It's not that simple. So how do we change the model where we have these legacy incentives in there? And it needs to change. I've seen studies that said, in 25, 58% of the drugs approved had a WAC price over $20,000. We're not going
DTC doesn't work.
We're not direct to pacing our way to serve out a very complex therapy. So again, it's all of us pulling together, looking at each brand individually. One of the things that hit me was there was robust discussion around it. It's actually going to make a difference in certain segments. A lot of talk about Trump RX. Is Trump RX real? Where is that, going to go? Lilly Direct, the Lilly's doing some very innovative things there. And then, we have Mr. Cuban that was talking about what he's doing with his program. But I guess it leads into the second topic that was a hot topic, which was that PBM, the dynamic with the PBMs. The most lively discussion, and I will say hats off to the two speakers, was 340B and the tension between the health systems and the expansion of contract pharmacies, very strong opinions on both sides. And again, we talk about good intentions. What that program was set out to do to help a certain subset of patients is now expanded. And quite frankly, somebody at the end made a comment that said, ultimately, the drug industry is not responsible for poor reimbursement from Medicare, commercial payers, and Medicaid to health systems. We can't continue to fill the gaps.
The looming rebate model that's upcoming, is that really where the tension kind of stem from?
There is, and I think just the continued expansion of the number of covered entity. The intention were dish hospitals for patients that were falling through the cracks, and when you're sitting in some of the wealthiest suburbs in America with a hospital accessing 340B, that's problematic, I think, in the long term for everybody.
You think about the three different buckets, let's call them, of gross to net that we discussed. You have rebates, you have 340B, and you have patient affordability. What's the common denominator? It's this asymmetry. One side sees it all in terms of patient benefit. The other side, ironically, the side that funds these programs are blinded. What should the solution be? It should be this visibility on the data.
Yeah, it's a lack of data equity, really, is what it ends up being. It's not only the fact that there's no visibility across the board for the companies that are funding this, but it's also like, when do they actually get visibility to what's going on? Oftentimes, they're looking at things like 2 years, in retro, and it's like, well, how do I fix that? Money's already gone.
Again, it gets back to the good intention. There are so many absolutely critical things happening in these institutions, but we have to, as a whole healthcare industry, rally around to make sure that we're doing this the right way to keep them doing what's important work, but also not putting such a tremendous gross to net hit on us that the next cure for cancer isn't coming.
Let's not forget about Maria, right? She's in that same mysterious box of like, wait, this number isn't right. $700, I can't afford that. So what's the solution there? The irony of the fact is that those who are funding these programs have the least amount of visibility on the data, whether it's the $90 billion on the pharma side or the $700 surprise that is frightening for Maria. What's the solution there?
I think it's kind of interesting you bring it up, because I go back to meeting a couple of innovative, very bright pharmacists, back, many moons ago. And I'm not surprised. I mean, really, for both of you, and I think in your team, there's always been this passion to say, what are some of the problems that we can solve, and how can we do that creatively and think about it differently? RISE, is really, timely solution to be able to say, we've got all of these complexities, and we need someone to try and help us simplify the process, come up with solutions that can make my brand program work. It's just been a lot of, a lot of pride in what you guys have been able to do, and 95 net promoter score. I don't know if I've ever seen one of those, but I think it reflects truly what your guys' passion was about doing the right thing for patients, doing the right thing for your customers.
Sometimes we feel like we have imposter syndrome because we're like, hey, we're not doing good enough, right? And can we do better? Because again, we took that oath as pharmacists, like no patient left behind. It's patient centric.
I would say in a long career, what I found is those of us, myself included, that have imposter syndrome are continuously driven to keep pushing. And I think a lot of it just kind of gets into the DNA. I mean, I started as a clinician. I wanted to help patients that were struggling in pregnancies to have a good outcome. And you never lose that once.
The solution, whether it's, solving for the $90 billion problem with pharma or the $700 problem with Maria, is that data equity. And, I think sometimes in life, it's you're maybe engineered for that moment. And that's why we have RIS Rx. We're in all these situations, Tom, where the manufacturer's trying to do it themselves, or they're working on with the copay vendors to try to do it. But whenever we get the same data, we notice that, hey, like there's so much left out there, meaning that it takes them 3 or 4 claims to find it, but we could do it prior to the first claim. And that delta between prior to the first claim and 3 or 4 claims is the entire max benefit of the copay card.
Right.
So that real-time solution is critical here. Key piece is like the perception of Switzerland and how we designed the platform. Like we designed to bolt on to the copay vendors, the co-vendors, by design as a teammate.
But where RISE is uniquely positioned is kind of sitting and getting a view of everything that's happening, and that is partner with everyone as necessary. But I think that's what's unique is, again, we got to pull people together to work, and that's what you guys are doing in real time.
You see all these silos, these vendors, the manufacturers, the pharmacies, the distributors, right? They don't see the same data. Their systems are segmented and they're not speaking to each other. And I think that, we took that in consideration, even when we created the platform. It was designed to bolt on and unite the ecosystem. When you're kind of connected to all of the key players, you just see more robust data, which allows us to solve problems in real time and have the impact that we're having right now.
There's a whole lot of things going on, but you've got to have somebody that's really coordinating it and setting the stage and taking all of that cumulative experience. And I think that's really what you guys have done exceptionally well, is let's make sure we're working across the ecosystem, but by developing something where you have that visibility and a broad cut of what's happening for patients enables faster response that can have a positive impact. Last year I spoke at the Drug Channels Conference, and one of my comments I made was patient services is the land of broken promises. And again, it's not a negative towards anyone. I even said, you know what, I did that myself. I scaled a business. I had the very best of intentions. But as you start to scale, you understand the complexity. And if you don't have the eye on the detail on those things, those good intentions quickly, fall by the wayside. So I'm not surprised to hear that, kind of that foundation you guys had is really what's helping drive RISE today.
I guess on the topic of, just paying attention to the details and just kind of quickly just going back to the DTP, I think it's great for patients. Again, it fits, for certain products. So one of the main things is really just upfront, just telling a patient, hey, am I covered or not, right? Like the patient's already going in knowing, hey, I'm going to pay $500 for this medication. But if you can give them a quick and easy answer of, hey, actually, you're going to pay $5 because your insurance covers it. You may not have known that, but here you go.
Yep.
And you should give that option to the patient. So as upfront transparency to patients as easily as possible, that's actually going to be achieved now in today's day and age. And so like with a lot of the advancements, that's some of the things that we're starting to talk to some of our clients about and they're really interested in because they want to give those patients those options up front to, again, ultimately improve the patient experience.
How many times have you done everything right as a brand team and the patient's got the script and it gets abandoned at the counter because they don't have an understanding what it is? So being able to do that in more real time is certainly going to help the patient get on the med that's been prescribed.
We always call it, if you could recreate what that patient's going to feel and experience in the pharmacy at point of prescribe or commercial that leads patient to brand.com and all of a sudden on that com check your coverage and you could select that and know that, hey, I'm going to pay $0. That patient's is more likely to go on therapy because there's transparency in the experience that they're going to have back at, when they walk through those pharmacy doors.
For sure.
We've talked about the $700 out of pocket for Maria. We talked about the $90 billion that pharma faces. We're talking about the lack of transparency or actually maybe the possible gap in DTP. I think the core common denominator there is the fact that there's data asymmetry between all the stakeholders that shepherd the patient experience, right? The irony of the whole thing is those who fund the program have the least amount of visibility. And that, I think, at least at this stage of the industry, that needs to change.
The system has, we've got major issues we're trying to work through, but you can't do that without just kind of having that visibility. They talked about it at the conference this week. You guys are living it, day to day with the manufacturers that you're supporting.
If we just keep doing what we're doing with good intentions, I think things will work itself out.
Sometimes magic happens when you have some really curious detectives asking the right questions and just want to explore like what the world of what's possible, right?
I think it's very difficult right now. The industry is going through tremendous pressures. I've sat at brand companies, I've read commercial organizations. There's a lot of pressure on each other. And it's like, who do you trust? Who can come in and just give us guidance? And there is no one person or company that's going to come up and solve problems. But it's the ability to just be open, honest with folks that are trying to, to work together. It's just connect the dots, and good things can happen.
We had a transparent conversation with one of our biggest customers, and that's the ask. Hey guys, we understand this is going to be very complex, but please be great partners. Let's know, like we're going to make mistakes, you're going to make mistakes, but let's unite together and get through it, and put the patient first.
So Tom, I want to thank you for just the time being here today. I think, on the next episode, we're actually going to be talking about just the IRA and just the aftershock. And obviously there's been a lot of changes in the last couple of years and increasingly going to be more sweeping changes. So I don't know if you have any final closing thoughts on that piece or if you're going to be tuning in.
I'll be tuning in because I think you picked the right topic, right? I think it's top of mind for all of us.
Yeah.
And I think, again, it's kind of putting that puzzle together. And there is a lot of detective work of, again, what are the intentions of that and what really happens. And no, I think that's a fabulous topic. I think you guys are spot on.
Just want to thank the audience for joining us again for GTN Edge. We'll see you next time.